Ramada Room welcomes all. Thanks for stopping by, answering the call. Ups and downs are normal for some of us. Many days I beg to get off this life bus. Neon lights flicker, a shadow on the wall. Dreams on the ceiling, we run and then we fall. Sharing stories over paper cups. Wheels keep turning but never enough. Life's a ride on a rickety old track. Holding on tight, never looking back. In the rubber Ramada Room we confide. Loud cry, love, and this crazy ride. Dusty postcards from the edge of nowhere. Heartbeats echo in the electric air. We dance on tables without to wait. Cry in the rubber Ramada Room, we're all high.
Good afternoon. It is Sunday, August 16th, 3:15 in the afternoon. What an odd time for me to go live. I know my guys are at the movies, so I kind of had to plan it while they were not here. So, so I had to do my timing just right to get to know my what I would need for hours. Rubber baby buggy bumpers. Hey Teresa, how are you? I hope everybody is well. Today we are going to we're going to talk about um the fact that Lindsay isn't the only one. There's more out there. There's many more out there. Um I would like to start off with going over Andrea Yates, her situation. I found a recent interview as of a few days ago where Rusty, her husband, from when the incident happened, did an interview. I would like to review that interview to see how Rusty feels today, what Rusty's thoughts might be about things that are going on with the Lindsay Clancy. Right now we have been doing the Lindsay Clancy trial. Um, and I just kind of thought it would be interesting. And there was another woman who was kind enough to go on Brian Enton. And when she went on Brian Enton, she told her survivor story. I would like to review that. And then we're going to jump over to a podcast that was done by three regular YouTube guys that I kind of want to talk about that were actually in the courtroom and seen a lot of things personally and can kind of tell us a little more insight into what the reactions were inside the courtroom. So with that, grab your snacks and your coffee.
Get ready for the ride. Buckle up tight. Grab your snacks and enjoy the show.
I today am running on chicken broth. My throat still hurts. My throat still hurts. I hope everybody is doing well. Denise, she's here again. Well, you're always here, Denise. Thank you. Good afternoon, Southern. I hope you are doing well. Southern. Southern is still here. Yeah, get your snacks and drinks. Get your snacks and drinks. And yes, welcome to the Hello, welcome to the Duck Pond. My name is Sheila. I am Rubber Ramada. We are looking at Rubber Ramada Reviews, where we talk all kinds of things, mental health. We talk trials. We talk document dumps. We talk lots of true crime. So if you enjoy that, please sub up to the channel, hit the like, subscribe. I'm a little all over the place today, and I apologize for that. My mother-in-law has dementia, tried to catch my kitchen on fire last night. So I'm a little rattled, and I keep having my one ear open right now to make sure nothing's happening because I'm here with her by myself. So if I take off running, it's because I hear something. So with that, we're going to just jump into it. And I have got my Nightbot. He's hourly. He's going to drop trigger warnings. He's going to drop links. He's going to drop I think I got my Nightbot fixed. So, he's on it. He's on it. And Brian, when Adam Lanza asked for mental health, was him told no as well? I don't have answers for that. I didn't do the Adam Lanza trial. I was not doing streams back then, so I can't answer your question, hon. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Maybe Google or ChatGPT or something, and this is I'm not an Adam Lan I don't understand. So, sorry about that. So, but what we're gonna do is we're gonna listen to the people who have lived it. We see that Lindsay has got this ball rolling about people and their personal experiences with postpartum psychosis, what it felt like, what they saw, and most importantly, from these streams that I've watched, is what they had wished people understood. So we're going to start off with Andrea Yates, who she was, her pregnancies, the 2001 murders, her postpartum psychosis. We're going to go into a little bit of her trial and why she became so important in understanding of the postpartum psychosis. Because now we're looking at Lindsay and we're kind of looking and comparing these two a little bit, because people are seeing things. So Andrea, the simple rundown on Andrea, it was June 20th, 2001. She drowned her 5 children in the bathtub of her Houston home. The only reason I know so much about that is because I lived in Houston. I lived in the area. It was very prominent on my news back then. So being from the area, it was in my face. So I knew about it. I learned about it. I studied it. It was very interesting to me. And a few years later, I personally dealt with a family member that dealt with it. So I've been through it a little bit on my own enough to speak on it comfortably. So we'll go back to Andrea. She had her 5 children. She was not initially charged with 5 counts of capital murder. They only charged her with 2 involving 3 of the children, Noah, who was 7, John, who was 5, and Mary, who was 6 months. Paul was 3 and Luke was 2. They were presented as evidence, which kind of was weird. Um, but the prosecutors didn't charge her with their 2 murders at that time. The first trial was in 2002. She pled not guilty by reason of insanity. Prosecutors, they were going after the death penalty. They rejected her insanity defense. They found her guilty. She received life imprisonment. But in 2005, there was an appeal, and the court overturned her conviction. And that was because of a psychiatrist expert that had testified. So we're going to listen to a little bit of that. So I'm going to add this to the stage and we're going to review some of this. Let's start off with this one. This is it's starting at part 4 because I kind of skipped over a little bit of the extra. It'll go into it in another stream. This just kind of talks about when it started happening.
The birth of Andrea's 4th son, Luke, was celebrated by the Yates family, and early on it seemed as though everything had gone on without a hitch. But in the weeks and months following his birth, Andrea wasn't sleeping more than a few hours each night, in addition to the fact that she was having to breastfeed every few hours.
Okay, let me pause this here. Brian, I'm not sure if you're well aware. This is Ramada Reviews. We review things that are currently and right now. I don't know enough about Adam Lanza, so this is what I'm going to say. If you need to go find a stream on Adam Lanza, then that's what you should do. Maybe this isn't one for you because of the comments. Yes, he was the one who did Sandy Hook. He asked for help, and well, that's not true. That's not true. And as far as you saying it's not transparent with Lindsay, we are still in trial, so it is still up for discussion. So, I'm sorry you're dealing with that, and I'm sorry you're feeling that way, but maybe this isn't the space for you. So, if you wanna hang out, more power to you. No, I didn't hesitate. I didn't hesitate. I don't care if it's a man or a woman. I'm having good you know what? As a matter of fact, I'll tell you something right now. You saying you hesitated? I don't argue with people in chat, but I am looking into more about Chad Dorman. I have more questions about Chad Dorman. Yes, he took the lives of his children, but I need to know why. I have questions. I have questions. And oh wait, Chad's a man. Oh my god. Okay. I've played with you enough. Have a good day. If you want to stay, stay. If not,
while also taking care of distant months following the birth of Andrea's fourth son, Luke, was celebrated by the Yates family. And early on, it seemed as though everything had gone on without a hitch. But in the weeks and months following his birth, Andrea wasn't sleeping more than a few hours each night, in addition to the fact that she was having to breastfeed every few hours, while also taking care of 4 children without any outlet, rest, or significant downtime of her own. Andrea was not getting anywhere close to the support that she desperately needed. Coupled with the lack of sleep, it was now clear that everything was about to come crashing down. Later that day, Andrea called Rusty and asked him if he could come home. And by the time he walked through the door, he would see his wife in a state of abject crisis. She was in the back of the bus, sitting down, shaking her hands and legs uncontrollably.
and just for the information about the bus, just to make that well known, they were in the process of remodeling their house and they had been living in the bus outside in the driveway. So to kind of clarify, because I know that does sound kind of odd.
Uncontrollably, barely able to speak, she finally uttered, "I need help." Rusty's response was to gather their 4 children, pack them into their vehicle, and drive a short distance away to the beach in Galveston. The following day, Rusty would take Andrea and the kids to her parents' house, and later that afternoon, while the children were sleeping, Andrea would make the first attempt to end her life by taking 40 of her father's trazodone pills. Andrea would be found by her mother and then rushed to the nearby hospital where she would receive life-saving treatment and would eventually begin her first of 2 stays in the psychiatric unit. During
Okay, so we see there she is reaching out for help. She had a stay.
that first stay, she would be diagnosed with postpartum depression, and even at this early stage, she was already showing signs of being catatonic, as well as clear symptoms of psychosis. Both indicators have severe and potentially life-threatening implications for a patient demonstrating all of Andrea's warning signs. Almost immediately, Rusty Yates would begin to play damage control to anyone who was willing to listen. He would refuse to acknowledge that Andrea suffered from major depression, choosing instead to call it the baby blues, while downplaying the severity of the situation. But in this first
There goes that comment, baby blues again. I think we've had comments that we've discussed that one.
hospitalization, Andrea was already telling doctors that she believed that she was a bad mother. Now, I wonder where she got that idea from. Just 7 days after being admitted into Houston's Methodist Psychiatric Hospital, Andrea Yates was discharged. But before leaving, Rusty would meet with her treating psychiatrist, Dr. James Flack, who instructed him to continue to watch Andrea 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. He explained that if for any reason he couldn't watch her, to make sure that someone else was with her at all times. Andrea was discharged with a month's supply of Zoloft and in order to meet with Dr. Eileen Starbranch as soon as possible. Earlier that month on July 1st, Andrea had her first meeting with psychiatrist Dr. Eileen Starbranch. Andrea's depression did not appear to have improved, and Dr. Starbranch recognized the clear signs that she was suffering from psychosis. In an effort to help treat her failing condition, she would prescribe Andrea her first antipsychotic medication, Zyprexa. But the mind of a psychotic person is an unimaginable web of contradictions and delusions because Andrea fundamentally disagreed with that diagnosis. And in many ways, she was embarrassed by it. So as soon as she learned what the Zyprexa was for, she began flushing it down the toilet.
Let's stop here. I'm going to pop this up. Was Zyprexa on this? Excuse me. Was Zyprexa on this list? Let me look. Zoloft, Ativan. Because I want to say we talked about Zyprexa the other day. Okay, it's not on this list that I see. This was the other list. No. Okay. It was just a question. Just me wanting to know if it was on one of those lists.
Which is why it was no surprise that just 3 weeks later, Andrea's PPD had reached a boiling point and she would attempt to end her life.
Her postpartum depression hit a boiling point. Okay? We have to make note. This is what here I is. Hi is. How you doing is? Hey banana.
Andrea's PPD had reached a boiling point and she would attempt to end her life for the second time. Andrea was admitted once more for psychiatric treatment, but this time Dr. Starbranch would go to greater lengths to help pull Andrea back from the ledge she had been pushed out on by a lack of support and by a husband who believed it was appropriate to raise a family inside of a rundown shack on wheels. Dr. Starbranch would prescribe Andrea
And we can't, you can't fault Rusty for that. He was doing the best he could for his family. Personally, from my personal knowledge of the family and situation, he worked at NASA. They were going through stuff. Like I said, they were remodeling the house. They had recently moved there and remodeling that house. That's why they were living in that trailer. So I kind of take a little offense to him saying a rundown trailer. Don't. It is what they're doing the best they could.
100 milligrams of Haldol that would be administered via local injection every 3 weeks by medical professionals who were able to ensure her compliance. The impact of the new medication was immediate, and Andrea seemed to recover in just a matter of hours. But it was during this second hospitalization that Andrea would admit that signs of her visual and auditory hallucinations had been present for many years longer than anyone knew. In fact, during a session with Dr. Thompson, the inpatient psychiatrist for the hospital, Andrea admitted that after the birth of her first son, Noah, she recalled a day where she had visual hallucinations that lasted several hours. But thankfully,
no, baby, I am live. I was modding for her before. I had already had my plan live since Friday, and we overlap. It is what it is. It is what it is. You can watch me on replay. Go watch her. You can watch me live. Watch me on replay. It don't matter, girl. It'll be here. It'll be here. I know. I did all my posting and stuff. It's all good. It's all good. Thanks for hanging out with the duck pond.
they went away later that afternoon. This would mean that Andrea Yates had already demonstrated signs of psychosis over half a decade earlier. And all of these important facts about Andrea Yates' medical and psychiatric history were readily available to read and to review by any psychiatrist who would treat her in the future. And you are going to want to remember that going forward. As we learned earlier, Andrea Yates would be discharged from her second hospitalization, and a short time later, she would go against medical advice with the encouragement of her husband, Rusty, and would completely stop her use of all of her medications. Just 2 months later,
stop all her medications. Let's rewind that and start over. You're right. I used that. And after I had my second baby, I would take baby blues off through. Yeah, it is a lot. There's more people. Robin, I see you're over in horizontal. We're in vertical. There's more people over in vertical. While I let this play, I'm gonna go paste the link for horizontal in the vertical. Give me just a minute. Yes, always be respectful. We're very welcome to all opinions, but just please stay respectful.
Would go against medical advice with the encouragement of her husband, Rusty, and would completely stop her use of all of her medications. Just 2 months later, Andrea would get pregnant with her fifth and final child, Mary.
Big little sister.
Andrea Yates gave birth to her first daughter, Mary Yates, on November 30th, 2000. By that winter, Andrea would reach out to her former colleague and fellow nurse, Debbie Holmes. Holmes would later reveal that during one of their conversations, Andrea would tell her that she believed that she was possessed by Satan. Andrea would tell Debbie that she believed that Satan was the cause and source of her previous mental breakdown. She went on to say that she was confident that her only problem was a hormonal imbalance and the devil. So convinced of this delusion, she would tell Debbie that Dr. Starbranch had fixed her hormonal complications, but it was now up to her to fight Satan. And this time around, Andrea would do a much better job at keeping Satan at bay. Over the years, Andrea had always maintained a very close relationship with her father, with the two of them enjoying countless sailing trips together over the course of her adolescence into her adulthood. So when her father died on March 12, 2001, Andrea's already precarious mental health condition would completely collapse. Within a matter of days, Andrea slipped back into the nightmarish realm of her severe postpartum depression, and this time around, her psychosis was completely unmanageable. Once again, Andrea was found sitting catatonic, her legs shaking a mile a minute, now scratching the crown of her head to the point of bleeding. Andrea was now completely unable to communicate. She had stopped eating, drinking, and was only getting 2 to 3 hours of sleep a night. Rusty immediately contacted Dr. Starbranch and asked for her advice on how to proceed. Without hesitating, the concerned psychiatrist advised Rusty to take Andrea immediately to Northwest Houston for an inpatient psychiatric hospitalization. She advised him to do this right away in order to prevent Andrea from slipping into a potentially fatal bout of psychosis. The urgency of this situation had reached a critical mass. But despite Dr. Starbranch's clear medical advice, Rusty would push back and explain to her that a 45-minute commute to the psychiatric hospital was too great of a burden on him. So instead of getting Andrea admitted and ensuring she would receive the necessary treatment she required at that moment, he instead chose to call a multitude of local psychiatrists in the area to try and plead with them to prescribe his gravely ill wife the medications she so desperately needed. The same medications that Rusty had supported Andrea stop taking just months prior to her getting pregnant against her psychiatrist's medical advice. Rusty would instead set an appointment with Dr. Starbranch for 1 week later and would wait to have Andrea admitted into a nearby psychiatric hospital on March 31st, 2001. 4 entire days after Andrea's psychiatric crisis began.
So you understand that it was 4 days.
Andrea Yates' condition had worsened so significantly that she would refuse to admit herself into the psychiatric hospital, firmly believing that she was not psychotic.
Okay,
Eventually, the local probate...
We got to keep up with these dates. So the action that she did of taking her children's life didn't happen until June 20th. We are still back in March. So you see, there is a timeline of her trying to get help, which, in all honesty, I'm not trying to sway you one way or another, but we also see that in Lindsay Clancy. She was trying to get help in her own way.
Court would intervene and sign orders committing her into the psychiatric unit of Devereaux, Texas Treatment Center on March 31st, 2001. Upon admission, Andrea would be described as catatonic, selectively mute, and showing a severe decline in her overall condition. She was no longer eating or drinking and would continue to lose weight over the next several weeks. Dr. Mohammed Saeed would eventually become her inpatient treating psychiatrist and would remain her treating doctor until the events of June 20th, 2001, the day that Andrea Yates would be arrested for the intentional drowning of all 5 of her children. Just 1 day after she was admitted, Andrea would give the treating staff the longest series of words that she had been able to put together for some time. She looked at them, seemingly heartbroken, and said, "I'm not a good mother." 2 days after admission, Dr. Saeed would write to probate court Judge Burwell, providing the court a patient status update for Andrea with regard to her court-ordered commitment. And in his status report of her treatment, it included the following quote: "Miss Andrea Yates was admitted 3/31/2001. She's catatonic and refusing to talk. She's also refusing to take her medications." In his medical notes, he would describe her as having postpartum depression with possible psychotic features. Remember that diagnosis. because it's about to become critically important. During Andrea's admission, Rusty Yates had informed the staff that Andrea had a history of mental health illness and had already been treated with Haldol, an antipsychotic medication.
Okay. Rusty's telling them what's been happening. Again, we are looking at this situation right now. We're not going to compare as our husbands choose to do what they want. We don't have to agree with it. We don't have to agree what Lindsay's husband chose to do. But right now we're discussing Andrea, so let's keep that on topic.
For these same issues by Dr. Eileen Starbranch. It is widely considered the accepted practice that upon hospitalization of a psychiatric patient, that the treating provider requests a patient's previous psychiatric records history, especially in light of a psychiatric patient with the severity of Andrea Yates' condition.
I just needed that pregnant pause there.
But despite the extremely disconcerting state she was in, her records would not be requested during the 13 days that she would remain hospitalized. And despite the fact that she had already made 2 previous attempts on her life. During Andrea's stay at Devereaux, she would attend daily group meetings, all of which were geared towards abstinence programs from drugs and alcohol, a problem that Andrea Yates did not have. In fact, this inpatient program did not have any postpartum depression groups, sessions, or therapy of any kind. During the group meetings, patients were taught the dangers of drug use and the critical importance of avoiding chemical dependency while maintaining long-term sobriety. These groups would become a seed that would germinate into Andrea's mind, becoming a root system of delusions that would convince her to avoid taking her psychiatric medications due to her fear of chemical dependency and addiction. In fact,
Sorry, did that sound familiar? She didn't want to take those meds in fear of chemical dependence. What? Oh, I'm sorry. Did that sound familiar?
on
Southern says help. Southern, are you okay?
Andrea's 5th day of treatment, the patients were shown a video concerning the risks of alcohol and drug addiction. It would be noted in her chart that Andrea Yates cried throughout the entirety of the nearly hour-long video. Andrea had only shown minor signs of improvement since her admission, but still appeared to be severely depressed and would only speak 1 or 2 words at a time with considerable delays between her responses. Earlier that day, the patients had been shown a video on the signs, symptoms, and treatment for depression, and several hours later, she met with Dr. Saeed. During their meeting, Dr. Saeed's notes reflect that Andrea claimed to feel 90% better than when she arrived, and she was now requesting to be discharged. Later that evening, when Rusty arrived, he would learn that Andrea was being processed for discharge, news that was shocking and hard for him to comprehend. Rusty may
So many comparisons if you've been watching the trial. I'm just...
not have been a psychiatrist, but she still appeared to be very depressed and only marginally improved. He implored Dr. Saeed to keep her at least 1 more day. Andrea Yates, after having been given no tailored treatment for her condition and having been shown videos that only added to her psychosis, a woman in crisis that was forced to attend groups that had no medical benefit to her, was discharged just 36 hours later. Rusty would take Andrea to her first in-office appointment with Dr. Saeed, who had been treating her with Effexor, Wellbutrin, and Risperdal since her stay at Devereaux. Rusty would explain to Dr. Saeed that her condition had continued to remain poor and reminded him that Andrea had previously been treated with Haldol successfully by Dr. Starbranch. He encouraged Dr. Saeed to contact Dr. Starbranch to discuss Andrea's previous treatment, a call that Dr. Mohammed Saeed would never make. Instead, choosing to raise the dose of Andrea's Effexor while declining to prescribe the one medication to her progressively worsening state was only
Sorry, I was trying to look at that list. I didn't realize I took it down.
to contact Dr. Starbranch to discuss Andrea's previous treatment, a call that Dr. Mohammed Saeed would never make. Instead, choosing to raise the dose of Andrea's Effexor while declining to prescribe the one medication that had already successfully treated Andrea's PPD. Over the next several weeks, Andrea's mental health would sharply decline, and Dr. Saeed's response to her progressively worsening state was only to continue to raise her daily dose of Effexor, a medication that had continued to show no signs of improving Andrea's mental health crisis. By early May, Andrea's condition had worsened significantly. She was back to her catatonic state, staring out in the void for long periods of time, pacing the house, refusing to talk, returning to the incessant scratching on her head and arms, as well as other signs and symptoms that showed that her medications were not successfully treating the problem. Later that same day, Andrea would fill the bathtub up with water, and when she was asked why she had done that, she responded by saying, "In case I need it." The following day, Andrea would see Dr. Saeed in office, and once again, she was fully catatonic. Despite Andrea Yates being his patient now for over a month, Dr. Saeed made no attempt to request her prior medical records from a psychiatrist who had already successfully treated Andrea for this exact same situation and condition. Andrea was again admitted to Devereux, where she would remain hospitalized for the next 10 days. 5 days after admission, Dr. Saeed would finally request the medical records from Dr. Starbranch's office. Rusty had also broke through to him and was able to convince Dr. Saeed to give Andrea Haldol, but instead of providing her the 300 milligram injection every 3 weeks, Dr. Saeed chose instead to give her 2 milligrams twice daily. This would represent less than 1/3 of the daily effective dose that Andrea had been given previously. Instead, Dr. Saeed chose to prescribe Andrea Wellbutrin, Cogentin, Restoril, Effexor, and her low-dose Haldol in an effort to treat what was objectively a critical mental health crisis. Over the course of that 10-day period, Andrea would remain in a catatonic state, maintaining very poor nutrition intake and generally refusing to participate in groups. Once again, the groups were not designed to help patients cope with any of the mental health disorders that Andrea was there to treat. Despite Andrea's progressively worsened state, her visibly obvious severe depression, as well as the signs and symptoms of her psychosis, Andrea Yates would be discharged on May 14, 2001. A discharge that would come as a result of her insurance company refusing to continue to pay for her inpatient care. Andrea Yates was discharged just 5 weeks before the horrific events that were about to unfold. The next day, Rusty would bring Andrea to her mandatory outpatient group sessions. After the group was over, she informed Rusty that they were still entirely about alcohol and drug dependency. Frustrated with the horrendous treatment options, Rusty took it upon himself to confront the staff. So Rusty approached the nurses who ran the program and inquired why their facility didn't have any programs designed for his wife or the numerous patients who were there for issues other than drug and alcohol dependence. The nurse looked at him, smirked, and said, "Why don't you file a complaint?"
Were any of y'all aware of that? I found that quite interesting. Rusty noticed there was not enough therapy going on for the diagnosis she was in the hospital for. And she told him, "Go file a complaint." I'm sorry? What? It was very shocking to hear that again because I had forgotten about that. And I'm sorry, there's somebody in my neighborhood that is really jamming on the backside of my house, so I don't think my microphone is picking it up. But if you like some good Mexican music, I can turn my microphone up. No, I'm trying to keep it where it's not picking it up. But yeah, so you see, that's something a lot of people didn't realize. He asked, he says, hey, we're not treating for what she's here for. Go file a complaint. Okay, good. I'm glad you can't hear anything. I was so worried people were hearing that in my background. Thank you, Abellis, for answering that. And one more thing I wanted to come back up here. Somebody had asked about being timed out. No, we only time out for being disrespectful, and you get a warning, and then you're asked to leave or escorted out. I don't know. It's the mods take care of that.
Just 16 days before the crimes that would claim the lives of the Yates children, Rusty and Andrea Yates met with her psychiatrist, Dr. Saeed, in his office. It is my firm opinion that the horrendous decisions that were made during this appointment by Dr. Saeed would figuratively place a high-powered firearm into the hands of a critically mentally ill woman. Because on June 4th, 2001, Dr. Saeed would tell Rusty that Andrea appeared to have plateaued in her treatment. Dr. Mohammed Saeed would later testify at trial that at that moment in time, Andrea had no definite indication of psychosis. This was despite the fact that he never once spoke with Dr. Eileen Starbranch and had already noted in his own records that Andrea had postpartum depression with possible psychotic features. Features that Dr. Saeed never tested for. In fact, no clinical testing was conducted to verify whether or not Andrea was suffering from psychosis. And this was despite the medical records that he had in his possession from Dr. Starbranch that already proved that she had a prior history of the condition. Instead, he chose to make the clinical decision that Andrea no longer needed her antipsychotic medications that he had willfully prescribed to her. And without any evidence to support his decision, he instructed Rusty to stop giving Andrea her morning dose of Haldol, a medication that was Andrea's only remaining lifeline, keeping her connected to reality. During the jury trial of Andrea Yates, it was revealed that one of the most important factors of medication therapy for the treatment of any mental health disorder is the importance of the patient maintaining.
And the guy you see standing with her is George Parnham. He was her lawyer through the whole thing and is still by her side to this day. In case you don't know, George Parnham, I believe, is in his 80s.
The consistent intake of the prescribed medications. Consistent daily intake of psychiatric medications is paramount for the ongoing treatment of any psychiatric disorder. It is widely recognized that one of the most dangerous choices any patient can make in connection to the treatment of psychosis is to abruptly stop taking their antipsychotic medication. In every iteration of the peer-reviewed medical literature that has ever been published concerning the use of powerful psychiatric pharmaceutical medications, they all state the importance of slowly tapering a patient off their medication before discontinuing its use entirely. Typically, a slow taper from an antipsychotic drug would be closely monitored over several weeks or even several months.
And we have had that discussion about tapering off drugs. And I totally respect that. And like I said, everybody's welcome to their opinions as long as they're not racist, religious, or taking things way out of context. But yes, it's fine to have that F Rusty feeling in your house. I'm not going to talk too much about it here.
So abruptly stopping a powerful drug as substantial as Haldol without tapering the dose slowly over time, especially for a critically mentally ill patient like Andrea Yates, would largely be considered a wildly dangerous and inappropriate treatment of her illness, especially because her condition was only continuing to get worse and had not shown marked signs of improvement. But when I looked through the records of this case, I was horrified when I realized that was precisely what Dr. Saeed did. During that meeting, he instructed Rusty to stop giving Andrea her morning 2 milligram dose of Haldol, and then just 3 days later, instructed him to stop giving her the 2 milligram dose at night. That, my friends, is what we call coming off of a medication cold turkey, and it's quite literally a recipe for disaster. The one and only thing keeping Andrea Yates from a total psychotic break, the only drug that had been able to help her manage her serious mental health crisis in the past. The literal finger in the dam that was keeping the floodgates from destroying what remained of her connection to reality was now being totally taken away. Andrea P.A. Yates, a woman who had a 2-year documented history with postpartum depression with psychotic features as per Dr. Eileen Starbranch's own psychiatric records that were in fact in Dr. Saeed's possession, was taken completely off of her antipsychotic medication, and what was even worse is what Dr. Saeed was about to do next. In the psychiatric community, the drugs Remeron and Effexor are often referred to as rocket fuel. They are a well-known drug combination that has a potentially lethal effect for anyone who has been diagnosed and treated for bipolar with psychotic features, a condition that Andrea Yates has since been diagnosed with present day. Dr. Saeed would not only take Andrea off of her Haldol, but would put in its place a dose of 45 milligrams of Remeron and 450 milligrams of Effexor XR. I have watched the terrifying effects of this illness up close and personal, and I cannot begin to fathom the nightmarish hellscape that Andrea Yates endured while being on what is widely considered the maximum dose of these medications. Especially because this combination of medications is referred to as rocket fuel because of the serious bouts of mania it can cause in psychiatric patients. Manic episodes that have the potential to effectively disconnect the mind from reality. But if all that wasn't enough, what Dr. Saeed was about to do next is, in my non-medical opinion, the catalyst for this entire series of events. Just 2 days before what happened in the home of Rusty and Andrea Yates, Andrea would go back to Dr. Saeed, and the very first thing that Rusty would say to him was, "She's declined, and I'm concerned." Once again, Rusty would ask about putting Andrea back on Haldol. Dr. Saeed would respond by saying, "It's a bad medicine." During Andrea's trial, Dr. Saeed would testify concerning Andrea Yates at this moment in time, a woman with a well-documented history of postpartum depression and psychosis, and yet he stated that he did not find any evidence that psychosis was playing an important role at that time. But the reality of that moment in time was that Andrea Yates had spent the last 2 years going in and out of the hospital due to her serious psychiatric illness. Several years later, many different psychiatrists who would treat Andrea would refer to her as the most sick psychiatric patient they had ever seen. But despite Andrea's failing mental health, her consistent catatonic state, her overall poor hygiene, nutritional intake, eye contact, and every other reason that existed to see a woman in absolute crisis, a woman who was quite literally pleading for help, Dr. Saeed looked at Andrea sitting across from him, seeing the state she was in, and said the following to her, quote, "You need to help me out with a more positive attitude. Chin up." In the entire history that I have been working on this channel, I have never been more disgusted by the words of any so-called medical professional. Words that lack any semblance of empathy, compassion, or concern for a patient whose life and the lives of her children were quite literally hanging in the balance. But this doctor didn't leave it there, because after he cut the brakes on the already out of control train barreling down a mountain that was Andrea Yates' failing mental health, he would cut the emergency brake too, because just 2 days before her mental illness would claim the lives of her children, Dr. Saeed would once again change Andrea's medications cold turkey, failing to taper the change despite all of the pharmacological evidence that states doing so is a virtual imperative. Dr. Saeed would take Andrea from 450 milligrams of Effexor XR to 300 milligrams overnight. Once again, totally disregarding all of the literature, peer-reviewed evidence, and the mountains of psychiatric history that proves the overwhelming danger of failing to taper a psychiatric patient off of a major antidepressant, instead opting to ignore the needs of his patient and forcing her to nearly half her dose immediately. Oh, but he did raise her dose of Remeron from 45 milligrams to 60, figuratively pouring pharmacological rocket fuel into the already diseased and critically ill mind of a woman whose delusions were about to take the wheel. After years of 4 different inpatient psychiatric hospitalizations, a progressively worsened mental health crisis and prognosis, a psychiatrist who had discontinued Andrea's use of the only medication that had ever aided her in the past, while still being on a litany of powerful medications, including the drug combination informally referred to as rocket fuel, combined with 2 prior attempts to end her life and then being given clear instructions to watch Andrea around the clock, or at the very least make certain that someone was there with her at all times. Just 2 days later, on the morning of June 20th, 2001, Rusty Yates would leave Andrea home alone with their children because he had an important meeting at NASA.
And this is where they start the outrage at Rusty, which I understand. He was told, don't leave her alone. I understand that. I do. Trust me, I do. He had a meeting. He went to work. Can we say, not to compare too much, but Patrick went to get something to eat. Did he think during that time anything could happen? I'm speaking from my heart and my mind. You have to do your own research and make your own opinions. These are mine and mine alone.
He would later admit that he believed that his mother was en route to their house and was expected to arrive soon.
So you see that? Okay.
With their children because he had an important meeting at NASA. He would later admit that he believed that his mother was en route to their house and was expected to arrive soon, but the reality...
He should have waited till his mother got there. That's just right. No, he did not. He should have waited till his mother got there before he left to go to this important meeting. Just my opinion.
The reality was that she was not due for at least an hour. Andrea Yates would tragically succumb to her years-long battle with psychosis, falling prey to the germinated seed of delusion, placed there by the fire and brimstone preacher who had successfully convinced her that she was a bad mother, a sinful Jezebel raising terrible children destined for hell, children who could only be saved by claiming their lives before Satan could take them away from her. I am not a physician and I am not qualified to provide medical advice. I have no formal education in mental health disorders, but I don't need any qualifications in order to know that Dr. Mohammed Saeed failed his patient Andrea Yates. I don't need to have any formal training in psychiatry to know that he also failed all 5 of the Yates children. And coupled with the kindling that was provided by Michael Warrenecki, as well as the match provided by her husband, a man who watched his wife attempt to take her own life 2 previous times, and despite being told to never leave Andrea alone, cast caution to the wind, instead choosing to play Russian roulette with the very lives of his own children. I am well aware that the law says that Andrea Yates must be held accountable for what transpired that day. But everything that preceded the events of June 20th, 2001 was a confluence of mistakes, failures, and a fundamental disregard for the seriousness of a woman suffering a mental health illness. A woman in crisis who simply just needed help. Noah, John, Paul, Luke, and Mary Yates deserved to be protected. They deserved so much more than what they and their mother received. Andrea Yates would eventually stand trial, and despite the mountain of evidence that supported that she fit the legal definition of insanity, the jury would go on to find her guilty of capital murder. The state had also asked the jury to place Andrea on death row, but they declined, instead choosing to give her life in prison without the possibility of parole. But after a Herculean effort by Andrea's attorneys and a critical mistake that was made by an expert witness for the prosecution during the first trial, Andrea Yates was granted a new trial on appeal. And this time, she was exonerated of capital murder due to insanity. Nearly 20 years after the events of June 20th, 2001, Andrea's defense attorney, George Parnham, was interviewed by a local news group in connection to this retrospective on her case. During the segment, he shared new details about his experience as her attorney. And while many of the facts were things that
You know what? I had that pulled up.
already
I closed
knew,
it.
Attorney Parnham would share additional information about Andrea present day that was hard for me to comprehend or even imagine. To this very day, there are still people who write to Andrea, a woman who will likely never leave the confines of her state-mandated psychiatric hospitalization. People who threaten, condemn, and torment a woman who has carried the weight of her tragic actions for the entirety of the last 2 decades. The tragedy of what transpired surrounding the case of Andrea Yates is one that I see with new eyes, precisely because of what we now know. When this case first broke, I was always led to believe that Andrea was a vengeful mother who had premeditated an unspeakable crime And I do not care if this is unpopular to say. All I see now is a woman who was failed by so many people. All I see is a woman deserving of compassion and empathy. And nothing about that statement should be controversial, especially in light of the history we just learned. Because there is a dark reality that we cannot afford to turn away from any longer. Our children are facing unprecedented rates of depression and self-harm on a scale that has alarmed professionals throughout the entirety of the psychiatric and medical professions. Culturally speaking, there continues to be a stigma with how we view and treat those who suffer from mental health disorders. Right now, all across the United States, we have tens of thousands of veterans, men and women who have served this country honorably. People who fought and went to war on behalf of their country, only to return to their homeland to be forgotten, dejected, and cast aside because they are struggling with waging their own wars on the battlefield of the mind. Homeless veterans are a stain on our society, and yet they represent a disproportionate number of the mentally tired and weathered from years of hiding her secret battles with demons that had robbed her of everything she ever loved. Andrea appeared to be frightened, but looking up at him like a child, she finally spoke. Please, don't leave me alone. Since the trial of Andrea Yates, the study of women's mental health has been said to have advanced by 50 years because of the incredibly important insights that her tragedy revealed to the psychiatric community. From understanding the critically important need to raise awareness about postpartum depression to the dangers of PPD developing into psychosis for all new mothers after having given birth. The impact of this case would culminate in 2003 when the Texas state legislature passed the Andrea Yates law. The law, still in place to this very day, requires hospitals and doctors to inform patients about postpartum depression and the signs and symptoms to be aware of in order to treat the condition before it becomes a crisis. When I started down the path of researching this case, I had only ever heard of it in the context of what I had seen on the news. Like many of you, I had no earthly idea the terrifying nightmare that Andrea Yates had endured at the hands of so many people who had refused to listen to.
Okay, I'm going to stop it there. All these links are in the description so you can watch them in their fullest. The pre-part that we did not watch, which went to the information about the religion and the beautiful mind and all that, is up here in the beginning. We didn't watch that. What I do want to reiterate is right through here.
A critical mental health crisis. Over the course of that 10-day period, Andrea would remain in a catatonic state, maintaining very poor nutrition intake and generally refusing to participate in groups. Once again, the groups were not designed to help patients cope with any of the mental health disorders that Andrea was there to treat. Despite Andrea's progressively worsened state, her visibly obvious severe depression, as well as the signs and symptoms of her psychosis, Andrea Yates would be discharged on May 14th, 2001. A discharge that would come as a result of her insurance company refusing to continue to pay for her inpatient care. Andrea Yates was discharged just 5 weeks before the horrific events that were about to.
So for one, we do see it was insurance. And for two,
unfold. The next day, Rusty would bring Andrea to her mandatory outpatient group sessions. After the group was over, she informed Rusty that they were still entirely about alcohol and drug dependency. Frustrated with the horrendous treatment options, Rusty took it upon himself to confront the staff. So Rusty approached the nurses who ran the program and inquired why their facility didn't have any programs designed for his wife or the numerous patients who were there for issues other than drug and alcohol dependence. The nurse looked at him, smirked, and said, "Why don't you file a complaint?"
File a complaint. Okay. So let's listen to Rusty Yates. Okay. He did a recent Como interview. And rather than guessing what Rusty thinks, let's take a look for ourselves. And we can listen to Rusty without necessarily agreeing with every conclusion he reaches, okay? I want to make that perfectly clear. Just because he is speaking doesn't mean you have to agree with everything he says. But let's listen to him and his point of view of everything that's going on now. Yeah, and you don't want to add to her torment, and that's up. And the judge, I hear you. I hear you.
Dealing with, like, you know, and it's like, oh yeah,
Let me
there
back
is
it up a
this
little bit.
thing.
When you first learned about this case, how did it impact you?
Well, I mean, my perspective is a little different. I think this is.
I have to stop, and I need to recognize this comment, because for her, for Muffins to say something like that, I'm a little taken aback. Thank you for that. Thank you for being open and unbiased and being able to listen to him and hear him out. Thank you.
Happened sporadically for a while. You know, there's a case here, case there. I mean, I had people contact me who'd lost loved ones before this happened in our family, you know, and it's kind of like getting struck by lightning. It's like not a
Common occurrence.
Not that common, but it happens, you know. So as far as surviving, I think that's a good word, surviving. It's and I think we're all a little bit different, you know, like some people, you know, fundamentally we're gonna handle and process loss differently, you know. So I try to withhold judgment of people who respond differently than I do, recognizing that we're all a little different. You know, I see things differently than most, and other people see things differently than I do. That's just part of being human. So
How did you come to understand what had happened to your children and why it happened?
that's a good question. Really, it was from almost the beginning, because when the tragedy occurred and I was sitting outside the house crying, kind of going between crying and I would say, how could you do this? I don't understand. How could you do this? I don't understand. I said that over and over and over again. And then it kind of clicked. I was like, oh yeah, there is this thing. There is this thing where women can unexpectedly kind of snap, or whatever you want to call it, and harm themselves or others. And my heart just sunk, you know, because I'm like, wow.
Let's read this real quick. It's out of the Cleveland Clinic. What is postpartum psychosis? Postpartum psychosis, PPP, is a mental health emergency. This condition affects a person's sense of reality, causing hallucinations, delusions, paranoia, and other behavioral changes. In severe cases, people with PPP may attempt to harm themselves or their newborn. This condition is treatable, and early treatment increases the odds of a good outcome.
Wow, that I knew that could happen. And I actually knew it was called psychosis. I think what I didn't realize is that what that looks like. You know, I saw it like, okay, you know, someone, you know, strips their clothes off, runs down the street and calls themselves Jesus or something, right? That's psychosis. It isn't kind of quietly trying to stay composed while dealing with all these crazy thoughts. You know, what your guest said earlier, I think is exactly true. The way I understand it is, it's very much like having a dream overlaid on your reality, like elements of a dream overlaid on your reality, so that you can't really tell what's real and what's not. So if they see spiders on the wall and slap the wall, to us, that wouldn't seem quite appropriate, right? Because they're just slapping a wall. But they literally saw spiders. I mean, it's actually activating the vision part of the brain. It's like, it's every bit as real to them as the rest of the world.
So Rusty, giving the people who aren't as familiar with your situation some context. Andrea Yates was not new to mental illness. She had a history of mental illness and multiple hospitalizations and different attempts. How did you rationalize what was going on with her and what it meant for her being around the kids?
Oh, at that time, yeah. Well, my understanding was she'd been depressed. She had postpartum depression, which and she had in 2 years prior, after Luke was born, she had thoughts of suicide. Right during that time, never in the course of time did she have any thoughts of harming our children, or at least that was never captured or stated or anything like that. As far as how she appeared, it was kind of like someone who's trying to compose themselves. She did have moments, like your guest said earlier, where she kind of waxed and waned, where sometimes she was really kind of in a catatonic.
And he keeps speaking of this guest from earlier. I'm not aware of that. So we just kind of have to bypass what he's saying on that. I'm not going to cover that. I have another person I'm going to cover.
Stage, she might have been shaking, picking at her hair, stuff like that. But then other times she was more conversant, more functional. And so I think that was another tricky thing about understanding where she was at. It was a moving target. It wasn't a constant for months. It was kind of like, all right, how is she today? And honestly, it's a lot the same today. When I call her or visit her, it's, which Andrea am I getting today? It's kind of sad.
Did you hear what he just said? When I call her or visit her, it's still, which Andrea am I getting today? I found
it's a moving target. It wasn't a constant for months. It was kind of like, all right, how is she today? And honestly, it's a lot the same today. When I call her or visit her, it's, which Andrea am I getting today? It's kind of sad.
But no version of Andrea in your experience had been one that you ever considered a danger to your kids.
Exactly. No, in fact, it was completely the opposite, because she's such a loving, giving, caring person. If they ever scraped their knee, they weren't running to me, they were running to her, because she'd dote on them and hold them and put a Band-Aid on it, even if there was no scar, So, whereas I might say, hey, I don't see any blood, get back after it, So,
does that sound like a dad kind of thing to do? Mom's over here putting Band-Aids on it, and dad's going, get your ass back out there and finish running them bases, buddy. If you got a scraped knee, it don't matter. So, I mean, it seems like it was that kind of family.
That was her, though. And so kind of what you said earlier, it's the person in the world that you trust most. And I think that's one of the hardest things to deal with, that level of betrayal. Because do you ever want to put yourself in that position again, where you could trust somebody to that degree, where you might be betrayed again?
So the decision to testify on her behalf for the defense in the trial, how hard was that?
It was an easy decision. I was going to do what I could to help her. I think while I was on the stand, I just shook my head, because I thought, this whole thing is kind of like what you alluded to earlier. It's a complete waste of time. It's like, it's cruel, it's wasteful, it makes absolutely zero sense. And, through the years, Can
we look at this picture right here? While we were watching the trial the other day, how I stopped to make note of how Reddington was holding Lindsay, her hand and everything. I see a lot of Reddington in what I know about George Parnham. So I just wanted to bring that to your attention.
Kind of come to realize that what we have is a legal system, not a justice system. If we treat it like that,
let me rewind.
Because I thought, this whole thing is kind of like what you alluded to earlier. It's a complete waste of time. It's like, it's cruel, it's wasteful, it makes absolutely zero sense. And through the years, I've kind of come to realize that what we have is a legal system, not a justice system. And if we treat it like that, then it makes sense. Then it's like, okay, maybe it tries to find justice occasionally, but really it's a legal system.
It's interesting. Yes, that distinction is drawn and is fair a lot. It's certainly imperfect. It's certainly it certainly is imperfect. Let's just leave it at that. The interesting pushback to your assessment of this being an ineffective use of resources and emotion, the usual pushback is, oh yeah, say that to Rusty Yates, say that to the father of those kids, and now see, but you are the father of those kids, and
Exactly.
you're saying it. So how did you get over your sense of loss and pain and enable yourself to see it differently?
I don't think those are really the same thing, getting over loss and pain. And I think that's what people can get confused, that, hey, if you support Andrea, then you don't really care. And that's the furthest thing from the truth. I think it's been 25 years and I'm still, I'd say, pretty close to getting back to where I was before the loss. I mean, it's devastating, and it isn't just the kids. It's Andrea. You know, it's not always easy to find a good partner, and she and I really were good together. And also hopes and dreams. You know, you have a vision for where your life's going to go, how you're going to live it out. That's gone all in one day, right? So I treat those sort of as separate. My support of Andrea stems from, it's really pretty simple. It's the analogy I give of, okay, say I'm driving with kids along in our Suburban. I have a heart attack and swerve into oncoming traffic and everyone dies but me. You know, what on earth good would it do to prosecute me? It would make zero sense. It wouldn't serve as a deterrent. It wouldn't serve as justice. It wouldn't serve as anything. That's kind of how I view Andrea's case. She got sick. You know, if it wasn't for her sickness, right, this would never have happened. And so I don't even see how it's possible, or, you know, to try to blame someone like her, or you know, or like Miss Clancy, who, you know, if they have an upstanding record, even their own family saying, look, this is completely out of character for them. But you know what? If you said that, you said it several times earlier, I found it fascinating, because if you say, hey, who thinks that someone who does something like this is necessarily insane, you'd be excluded from the jury. You wouldn't even be on the jury. That question was asked to the jury.
You hear him right there. You heard that right then and there. Well, we're not discussing that, Flowers. Thank you, but I'm going to have to delete that comment. We're not having that discussion. Thank you.
But you know what? If you said that, you said it several times earlier, I found it fascinating, because if you say, hey, who thinks that someone who does something like this is necessarily insane, you'd be excluded from the jury. You wouldn't even be on the jury. That question was asked to the jury panels in the first trial, and they were all excluded. Everyone who said, hey, yeah, any mother who does this is crazy, is not on the jury.
What's the ace in the hole in this perverse way is having the husband. But the husband's got to be careful, because, I mean, he's not been charged, but, you know, if he gets up there and he's like, oh, she was crazy. I mean, there's no way that she could have been understanding what was going on. I mean, she was spiraling. Well, why'd you leave her with your kids? You know what I mean? So there's a little bit of a
double-edged sword.
Right?
Yeah. I don't know. I would be concerned about exposure for her husband. And I don't know if he has a lawyer, if he's going to be given any sort of immunity, because he is also a witness for the prosecution.
Yes.
So he's a witness for both sides. And now typically if he was just a witness for the defense, good luck trying to get immunity, you know, from the other side. But since he's also their witness, I'm wondering whether there will be some sort of immunity, or at least, you know, an attorney appointed to him. But you're right. I mean, he does have some exposure. That day, and this is part of the premeditation evidence for the prosecution, she sent him out to a further spot to pick up food, further than the normal place that they would get takeout from, and also sent him on a pharmacy errand. And so the whole idea that the prosecution,
she bought time.
To create the opportunity and the time to strangle her children. So, you know, I mean, if you think your wife is that volatile mentally, wouldn't you just call Uber Eats as opposed to going out and picking up the food?
Oh my goodness. You flooded yesterday. Okay, you did. No, and I'm not trying to be disrespectful. I wasn't trying to be Flowers, just some things that I'd rather not be said in my chat to be on replay. So, yeah. And thank you, little bit of Lisa, for being here. No. I just jump right in. Okay. So that was our conversation where we listened to Rusty for a few minutes. So whether you can understand what Rusty's saying without agreeing with his conclusions he's reached, that's up to you. We are all here for our own opinions, our own thoughts, and I'm open to everybody's. So we've heard what we're going to do is we're going to talk about another woman who has come forward. She was on Brian Enton. I found her quite fascinating, the fact that she's willing to tell her story. So we're going to listen to her for a little bit. It's about 40 minutes long, but y'all know me, I speed things up. And we'll get through this a little bit faster. And we're going to let her experience speak for itself. We're just going to hear from someone who says, I've lived through it. I've lived through it. So, you know, we don't have to think a certain way. We don't all have to agree. But let's let her explain to us what it felt like to her. Did she know she was sick? Did she recognize her thoughts as abnormal? Could she appear to be normal around people? Like, I'm good today. Go run and grab me a sandwich at the sub shop, okay? And let's see what finally got this lady help. And what does she feel needs to be known more about postpartum depression?
Talk about and cover this. It's definitely a really hard topic to talk about, but you know, the thing is if you are knowledgeable, you can actually save your own life or save someone's life because while what's playing out in the news right now is kind of a high profile tragic case, the reality is that postpartum psychosis is a highly treatable temporary illness. So I think it's important to educate people about because it's literally life-saving to know about. And I think, you know, for myself, the reason I'm so kind of motivated to share about my own experience is because unfortunately my husband and I were blindsided when I experienced it in December of 2015. And just like you were saying, you know, you hadn't heard of it before this, we are parents at that point of two girls. We're both educated, have access to healthcare, good healthcare, good in the standard of the United States currently, and hadn't heard of it. And something I learned recently, which I thought was really interesting, is sudden infant death syndrome is less common.
I will also say this. We talked the other day about, if you might want to go back and look at some of our other streams about the trial, we talked the other day about people just saying, I'm fine. And by saying, hey, Muffins, how are you today? And Muffin says, I'm okay. Is she really? Or is she just saying that to appease my question at the moment so I don't question her because it's something she'd really not want to talk about and would rather avoid? So we talk a lot about mental health in here, and I want everybody to be okay with that. I want you to be okay with that. It's a hard topic.
And then postpartum psychosis, but most even non-parents have heard of SIDS. I don't know if you have, but and so it's kind of interesting to think about how, you know, things that are in the cultural water like SIDS that are concerns that relate to an infant are very much sort of part of a conversation that parents know about. But the complications that a mother might experience, like maternal mental health conditions, which are the most common complication of childbirth, are not yet something that we're preparing mothers and families for. One thing I often think about is like, there is no other period in someone's life where we can predict they're going to have a mental health condition with such precision. It's like almost like we have a crystal ball when women are going into this tricky period, and yet we're not using that crystal ball or that data to actually create preventative plans for women, which I was able to do with my third kid and go on to have a third kid successfully and without recurrence. And so I would just say, you know, my experience, I also experienced postpartum psychosis 8 months after the birth of my second baby girl. It was very much like I went from kind of like not feeling like myself for months to then suddenly believing I was being followed and then surveilled and that my husband was in on this complex plot. And, you know, thankfully, I really kept everything in, even though we were in a small New York City apartment at the time, and I'm there with my husband because I think he's my enemy. And so I'm trying to not let him know that, you know, I'm sort of wise to him so that I can have a better chance of escaping. And I kept that in for many, many hours until I thought we were kind of out of time. And then our battle turned physical. And then he was like, okay, now I know she needs help. But for those hours leading up to it, I was behaving normally enough and keeping it in enough that he didn't know that I was experiencing a mental health emergency. And so I think that's really, really scary, honestly, that somebody could be operating normally, but afraid to reveal what's going on in their head because they feel like, somebody might be against them or some harm might come to them. And so for me to watch this trial, honestly, it's devastating, like I'm sure it is for everyone. But I think what I see primarily is that like it doesn't have to be this way. I see a real systemic failure because of that kind of crystal ball I mentioned earlier. When we had our third kid, I knew I was at risk of recurrence of postpartum psychosis, and so we created this really thoughtful plan that wasn't just about beautiful baby rooms or just my obstetric care. It was actually about keeping me well because we were worried of what might happen. And what we found in that experience is not only did we get through it without recurrence, I took things like prophylactic medication and had a therapist and reproductive psychiatrists and whatnot, but we also experienced so much more joy the third time around. And so when I know what we know about maternal mental health and what we can do for women, even women that are at risk, like myself, the third pregnancy, and yet when I see what the current standard of care is,
I have to kind of say, when I was listening to this the first time, my very first thoughts going through this, listening to this, was she had PPP with her second child. And she was brave enough to go on to have a third child and risk that again. Sorry, ma'am, I'm not sure. Just my opinion. You're all entitled to your own, but I don't think I would risk that. Knowing what I know, she's over there on vertical. She don't know. Gen C just over there just a chatting away. She's over on vertical, Abellis. See, look, Jen, Abellis is looking for you.
It just breaks my heart because we can prevent these kinds of tragedies rather than kind of only being invested in maternal mental health when a tragic case hits the news. And to be honest, a tragic case that's sort of the right social class and background to captivate news. And when in reality, like this is one of the most common complications of childbirth, not postpartum psychosis, but maternal mental health conditions. And we're not planning for everyone to be kind of held by the system. Instead, the system sort of, in fact, kind of turning away from us at the most vulnerable period in our lives.
So you have 3 kids. Your first child, did you have any symptoms?
I would say I have a little bit of I was in my early 30s and I definitely had a job that I really believed in, and I can be a little perfectionist or had some of those tendencies. And only in retrospect, after experiencing what I did with my daughter Millie, can I sort of see my postpartum experience with my first a little more clearly.
And that is beautiful, Flower. That's beautiful that you were never in that position, that feeling of ever wanting to hurt your children or anybody else. Now, me personally, back in 2001, as I've said before in my past streams, I did go through a depression. I went through a depression that I wanted to hurt myself, not others. Not others. So my others around me were my safe haven. They were my rock, my strength. I needed them there 24/7. So we all go through depression in our own ways. And I think it is beautiful and wonderful that you never, ever had that thought, because you would never want to wish that on anyone. Never.
I would say I was anxious and I was overworking and putting too much importance on that. But no, I didn't experience a mental health crisis or anything. I just was like, I guess that's what it's like to have a job and and a young baby in New York City. And so in retrospect, I think I probably had a little postpartum anxiety with her.
And so then how long after did you have your second child?
Yeah, so I had my first July 5th, 2013, and then I had Millie
Cindy.
March 18th, 2015. So they're about 19, 20 months apart. So it wasn't that far apart.
And I think you said the postpartum psychosis, was it 8 months after?
Yes, yeah, 8 months after her birth.
Did you feel okay up until then?
I would say, having experienced birth before and having experienced postpartum before, I was in some ways so well prepared because I was not I wasn't worried about all the kind of little things that I was with the baby the first time around, just like kind of never having done parenting. And so the second time around, I'm like going in with like, okay, don't freak out if, that happens or this happens. I had kind of like a knowing around how to parent. And so I had a really great maternity leave with her. It was unpaid, but I took 3 months and I was just enjoying being with her. We were able to put June, my older one, in daycare. So I could kind of focus on parenting the infant and, recovering, which is obviously, a giant privilege. And so I had kind of like a blissful maternity leave in some ways, but it was when I went back to work and started to take on, honestly, a lot of stress in my workplace that I started to say to my husband, like, I don't feel like myself. And that was about 4 months postpartum. And, we had said like, oh, if you're still feeling this way in 2 weeks, let's go see somebody. But, we just kept kicking the can down the road because, next thing you know, you're 2 working parents.
We'll discuss it in 2 weeks. I kept kicking the can down the road. Well, hello. See, that's the problem. We think, oh, it'll get better. Just give it a few days. It'll get better. I'll be okay. Just let me rest. It'll get better. Don't worry about me. I'll be okay. I'm repeating as if I know these things.
Parents in the city, commuting and kind of keeping everything in the air, trying to pay rent, working a lot. We didn't have any family support. And so, to be honest, going to see somebody to talk about me kind of not feeling like myself felt like a luxury I couldn't afford. I'd also never been to therapy before, and we'd never heard of postpartum psychosis. And the one illness related to childbearing that I was aware of, postpartum depression, I didn't quite match that picture I had of it in my head. Maybe it was like an erroneous picture at that time, but I sort of felt like I would feel like sad a lot. And I didn't really feel sad all the time. And so we just kind of kept going until, 8 months, 8 months post-birth. It was just like, I went from kind of like not feeling like myself to just my rational mind being left behind with the shutting of the subway doors. And suddenly I'm like in the center of this complex plot. Everybody's out to get me. And my brain, I've actually never seen it move that fast before, but it was like pulling in any little detail that I was seeing on the subway and then later at a happy hour and then at home with my husband. And it was just kind of quickly knitting them into this reality that was totally diluted, but it was my new reality. It was like my new truth. And it was a Friday night. And I actually remember that morning going to work. And I remember feeling a little more scattered than I've ever felt before, but I was still like, okay, go to work. At that point, I actually was like starting to say aloud actions to be able to do them. So as an example, I'm reaching for the apartment door. I'm like narrating in order to focus. But I'm like, okay, I gotta go to work. So I ride a train, 3 trains for an hour. And I remember kind of going into work, and I remember my first weird thought. And it was, I was in the elevator with a woman, and she was like, I've been here for 50 years. And I was like, that's weird. And she'd gone to school there, and now she worked there. But I remember after that, I was like, I wonder if there's something keeping her in this building, like some force. And that was like a weird thought I could see. And that was like Friday morning around 9. I couldn't focus that day at work. I was like having trouble actually reading a document that I'd read yesterday. It was almost as if it was written in another language. And I was giggling a little, but like I was enough myself that nobody flagged anything. But where things totally took a turn and like was like the floor was pulled out from under me.
I need my child to go to vertical and delete a comment for me, please.
Was when I stepped on the subway to go home. And like I said, step on the subway, everybody kind of looks at you because you're a new body on the subway. I had an orange hat on, but in my mind, I just like felt everyone's eyes on me. And then I was like, oh my gosh, I'm being watched. And then as often happens on public transportation, people are like looking at their iPhones and have earbuds, but my brain is like, oh, I'm not just being watched. They're like communicating my moves and I'm being surveilled.
Isn't that such a weird thing? I wasn't sure if she said that was during COVID or not. Hey, Dutch, good to see you, love. You were over there doing your own stream. I figured you'd still be over there. I'd already had this plan. I stayed as long. I dropped all my links for you, and I had to run. But I'm glad you're here.
And then from that moment, I am no longer seeing these thoughts as weird. They're my reality.
And what happened when you got home?
So I actually went downtown. I was supposed to meet a friend at a happy hour. She was in from out of town. despite believing everybody was out to get me. I'm like switching trains. I'm taking off my orange hat to lose people who might be following me. I'm still like, what do you do when you think people are suddenly everybody is out to get you? I'm like, okay, just continue as normal. Do what you were planning to do, which was go meet this friend for a happy hour. I walked in to this bar and a bunch of my old colleagues are there. And at first I'm kind of like relieved to see a familiar face. And then I turn and there's kind of an unfamiliar face with like big glasses next to her. And I'm just like, wait a second, this is not a happy hour. This is a recruitment event. Like they're trying to recruit me into this thing that is running some sort of kind of cultish scheme. So I'm there and believe it or not, I'm like trying to have pleasant conversation with people while in the background, my brain is just turning on like, what's going on? What's this recruitment event about? How do I get out of it? And then the moment things took like a deeply different kind of fear turn was when my friend came up to me and she's like, who's watching June and Millie? And at that moment, I was like, oh, she's threatening me. She like knows this recruitment event is going poorly. And she's telling me the stakes that my kids will be killed. So next minute,
It does. It gives a whole new perspective. I mean, you're seeing that it's not the only one. People are talking, oh, well, we haven't heard about this before. Lindsay. Well, no, it's happened in the past. And not only are we dealing with Andrea Yates, who had a trial for it, now she's discussing it, but she was able to get help. There is help out there. And the fact that the mental facilities were not facilitating that help that was needed, and they keep masking this drug and that drug, and let's try this couple of days. No, let's try that one for a couple. It is just so much out there. Yeah, clerical. But even in clerical, you're going to learn and see a lot. We learn a lot.
I'm kind of like picturing that almost happening. I just say, I don't feel well. I've got to leave. But I'm so lost in it that she's like, oh, if you don't feel well, just go. I had a drink. And she's like, I'll settle the bar. And I was like, no, I wouldn't let her get my drink because I thought it might be some like implicit agreement to join the cult that I was up against. I then kind of walk through the streets of Lower East Side, throw open the door to my apartment. Our apartment. There's my husband with our like 2-year-old and 8-month-old. And he says to me, why are you home? Which like, if you're a parent of 2 little kids, you don't get much opportunity, or we didn't, to go socialize with friends on a Friday night. And he was saying, why are you home? As in like, you were supposed to do this thing. But I thought he was saying, why are you home? As in, he wanted me to join, and he was in on this, this plot. And so then from there, I'm like, okay, I don't know where your loyalties lie, if you're like more with them or more with us. And so the next, 14 hours become me trying to assess, is he more on our side or is he more on theirs?
I can tell you from a personal experience right there, when she says I had to assess whose side he was on, she's in a mindset. She's thinking her mind is going 500 miles an hour, more than likely. And the racing thoughts can be totally devastating to you emotionally and mentally. So, yeah.
All while I'm kind of keeping everything I know in. Meanwhile, I'm starting to be convinced that poisonous gas is being released into our apartment via our fridge that had been rattling. I'm like opening the windows in December. He orders sushi. I don't touch it. I think it's poisoned. We sit there and watch a show, and I'm, once the kids are in bed, and I'm kind of keeping it together, or I believe I am, and keeping it in. And then I start to have visual and auditory hallucinations, though at the time I didn't know that that's what they were. And I see a man's face, actually a relative of mine, on the TV. And he says, if she thinks she's getting out of this, she's got another thing coming. And at that point, I'm like, Colin, I just have to go to bed. I'm tired. I like feign tiredness.
What did she do right there? She just covered it up, masked it. I'm tired. I'm going to lay down. She knew she was having trouble right then. She could have reached out. I'm just saying. But she's covering her own
comes
thoughts.
to bed eventually. I stay awake all night. I'm cycling through mostly terror, but there were a couple of moments of like, maybe actually he's in the CIA and he's going to tell me tomorrow, and it's all going to be okay. And the weird thing is, he had tried out for the CIA years ago, applied for it rather than tried out. And so my brain was kind of pulling in details from different places to kind of explain what was going on, but it was mostly sort of sheer terror. I'm awake all night. In the morning, that whole night, I'm continuing to get up and open the windows and check on the kids to make sure they're still alive. In the morning, I haven't slept. I still don't know how to get out of this. And then he goes down to get the mail, and he brings back a book, Ta-Nehisi Coates, Between the World and Me. And I see on there is, it says required reading, and it was like a rave review by Toni Morrison. But in my brain, it like latches onto the phrase required reading. And I'm like, oh my God, they're like delivering the cult readings to our door. Like there's, this thing is getting bigger than I even thought. He kind of tosses me an Us magazine, which is like a guilty pleasure at the time, and is sensing something's off with me. And it's like, why don't you go relax? So I go to read it, but like the loose talk section starts to become like threats about me. I think they're directed towards me. And then, eventually I am believing there's no way out of it. And so instead I'm kind of trying to escape. And then eventually I'm kind of trying to prove my loyalty to what I'm up against. So, eventually I'm racing my husband to trying to get to our two kids that he now has in our bedroom, to get into that door, to get to them, to save them from, I believe this gas is concentrating and this cult is coming. And then I'm alternating between trying to get to the door of our apartment to get to the roof, because I think, if I show I'm willing to jump from the roof, maybe that will show my loyalty and this whole thing will stop. And so it's like this race. And my husband at this point has called 911, though he was reticent to do so. But a friend was like, listen, if you're afraid she's going to hurt the kids or herself, you got to do that. And, I punched him in the face trying to get to the kids. And so we're racing back and forth. I'm trying to kind of switch up strategies. I'm saying, no, I just need to go for a run to feel better. But he's like now positive. Like if I let her out that door or I let her to the kids, like something terrible is going to happen. And so then eventually the NYPD come and they handcuff me on the floor of our apartment. And I'm still totally deluded. I don't believe they're the NYPD. I get put in what I learned later is in an ambulance, but I don't think it's an ambulance. It's like everything I was believing was being corroborated, because like I think people are going out to get me. They do come to get me. I'm like pleading with two women that are in the ambulance, like, please, are either of you moms? Like my kids are dying back there. They're obviously not turning around. They're heading to the ER. And I get to the ER and people's eyes are kind of glowing, and I'm seeing faces from like my work. Some people are like from the dark side and some people are good. And then all of a sudden kind of just everything cuts black. And that's when I get a shot in the arm. And then I eventually wake up in the 18 West Wing of Bellevue Psychiatric Hospital. Although again, at that point, I didn't believe I was in a psychiatric hospital because I was still deluded. And so then kind of things enter a different chapter, but I'm like physically safe and kept from myself and kind of treated as the risk I was to myself at that point, being, committed to the inpatient unit.
Did you ever think about like hurting the kids, even though I'm guessing you would have thought you were helping them in?
Okay. We're going to pause there for a break. So she's basically told us that she was having these psychotic thoughts that she did not understand what to do with. And she's seeing these things. And these are her feelings and her thoughts. And we have to respect that. Again, this is where we go back to, did people misunderstand her behavior? Were they also noticing it? Who else around her seen this happening? I mean, I have questions. Y'all know me and my questions. I've always got more questions.
That state?
Yeah. So no, I never had a thought of hurting them, but I definitely had a thought of saving them. And if saving myself is kind of going to prove I'm willing to jump off the roof. Remember, I didn't actually want to jump.
Right.
But if you get up there and then it doesn't stop, what's the next thought? I can't say. I don't have thankfully, like an alternate case with my own, I can't say, but I can say that the way I was thinking about saving myself doesn't seem to be a safe solution. Yeah. So that's the only thing I can say.
That's respectfully, you can have that decision. Yeah. Yeah. If harming others, we certainly do not. Yeah, no. And that's perfectly fine. That's perfectly fine. We all have our opinions on this case. And that's the biggest part about this. And all opinions are welcome.
And so you said you were kind of depressed, but like, was everything sort of okay
Steve.
until that moment in the subway?
Yeah, it was. I mean, like
She
I said,
is.
it was weird that I couldn't like read a document that Friday. Like I literally was like, maybe it's too loud in here. I'm like blaring Adele. Like, so my focus was totally off. But yeah, I'd been anxious and a little bit sad is all I could say. Like, I just don't feel like myself. But then in that moment in the subway, it's just like somebody pulls the rug out from under me. And I'm just like, oof, just kind of drop into this totally deluded, terrifying new alternate reality.
And so then when you get to the hospital, like how long does it take to come out of that?
So I didn't believe
Sorry, don't mean to
I was in a
laugh.
hospital. So I wake up in the dark. I'm on a twin bed. I've got a roommate. She's itching and scratching and waking in the night. And I think I'm captured, but I don't know if my kids are still alive. And so I think I've got to fight to get out of here and get to them if they are. So I try to escape. And if you try to do that, you get a shot in the arm. So then I get, or shot wherever to be sedated. So that happened. And I tried that kind of multiple times. And when my husband would come visit me at Bellevue, I would send him away because I thought he was on their side, in the beginning, that he had a hand in keeping me there. And honestly, I didn't even think he was like visiting me from like schlepping from downtown. I thought he was kind of like behind some one-way mirror, like kind of watching to see if I would break. And so for the first, I don't know how many visits, I sent him away. I refused to take any of the medications. And at least to my knowledge, unless there's a court order, they can't make you take the medications. And so I was only kind of getting knocked out. Do you know what I mean? And eventually from the sedation there, I actually don't know what was in it. I could look, I have my records, but eventually I'm there for long enough and I've tried to escape a few times without success.
I don't mean to find that comical, but she tried to escape. Okay. If you've ever been in a hospital and have that feeling of you want to escape, you want to get the hell out of there. Can we relate back to Andrea Yates was in there for a few days and her insurance ran out, so they let her go. Oh, Lindsay Clancy was told that she was not sick enough to be there because of all the different medications she was on, so they refused her. And here she is wanting to escape and get the hell out of there. All different stories.
And my husband's like,
yes,
looking at me with like tears behind his eyes, like, please just take the medicine. I promise. Like, if there's not a cult, like you're in a mental hospital in Manhattan. And like, I still didn't really believe it. And this woman who like says she's a psychiatrist, like, I don't really think she's a psychiatrist, but one day she says something that helps me. She's like, hey, listen, if you stop trying to escape and you start to behave, you can see your kids again. And at that moment, I was like, I need something written down. And next time she saw me, or maybe it was even in that minute, I can't exactly remember. She like wrote it down on a piece of paper. It could have been like a scrap of paper for all I know, but I was like, okay, maybe this is real. And so then eventually they, they call your name and they say Megan. And then I went out of my room and I like willingly took the lithium and resveratrol. And that then started to actually bring me back to reality. And eventually I'm like, oh, dealing.
Okay. And I will tell you, if you know anything about lithium and halidol, yes, it will bring you out of whatever you're in. But those are some strong drugs. You have to be monitored by a doctor. I don't know what she's fixing to say yet next, but I can only hope she was monitored by a doctor for days after starting those medications. That was a lot. Let me see what chat's saying. Steve says, "Let me out." Steve, what's the matter? You just got here and you're already wanting out. Hey, Hannah, welcome back, love. See, Cindy says, if you've ever witnessed family member going through a psychotic break, it's heartbreaking. It is. It is. It is. It's very, yeah. And they were some heavy they are some heavy, heavy.
With what honestly for me was like a new form of painful.
There you go. Thank you, love. Comedy and chaos. That's right. We are comedy in the chaos. We have to laugh a little to get through some of the craziness. And again, I want to thank you one more time, Orange Rose, for the high five. I appreciate that, hon.
And then I went out of my room and I like willingly took the lithium and resveratrol.
See, and the thing, and here I am. I'm squirreling right now, Cindy. You know me. And the thing with this is your son's been on it for 10 years. It saves him. That's right. At certain doses, it can be good for people. And he's probably, I'm just assuming he's on a maintenance dose. And that's what we have to do with mental health. We have to find something that works for that person. And it's not the same across the board. It's not the same across the board.
Or she like helps me. She's like, hey, listen, if you stop trying to escape and you start to behave, you can see your kids again. And at that moment, I was like, I need something written down. And next time she saw me, or maybe it was even in that minute, I can't exactly remember. She like wrote it down on a piece of paper. It could have been like a scrap of paper for all I know, but I was like, okay, maybe this is real. And so then eventually they, they call your name and they say Megan. And then I went out of my room and I like willingly took the lithium and risperidol. And that then started to actually bring me back to reality. And eventually I'm like, oh,
Hey,
dealing
Queen.
with what honestly for me was like a new form of painful reality is like, oh, this was all in my head. And like, now I got to deal with that.
How long did it take for you to decide to take the medicine roughly?
I think, so I got admitted on a Saturday and I think it was like Tuesday or Wednesday.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so when you started taking it, excuse me, did you,
Today,
like, do you just start coming back right away?
Not really. I wouldn't describe it as that. It's not like you wake up and you're
But you see her say a couple days before she actually started taking them. So welcome in, everybody. I see everybody
like,
rolling.
oh, that's over. Like, here I am. Not at all.
But it kind of started
it's
like
not
that.
my
That's why I'm like, it kind of seemed like it happened so fast. I'm like, do you just kind of snap out of it?
No, at least not in my experience.
Yeah.
The weird thing is that I didn't realize it at the time, but I had gone through trauma, right? You have this brain that you've trusted suddenly kind of ripped from you like at 5 p.m. on a Friday night or 5:30 p.m. And so I am like struggling with deep.
And that's the problem is you start thinking this is that one med that works. And then after a while, sometimes it stops working. So then you're on a whole nother roller coaster and you're looking for something else for that fix of mental health problems. We are just steps from past bloodletting when it comes to you are absolutely right, you two bad actors, because I mean, people are, I think right now with this trial going on, in all honesty, is opening up a whole new discussion for mental health that needed to be opened up way, way long ago.
PTSD right after that. And so I say that to say it's like, it was more convincing to believe anything that could be connected to the plot that I had sort of lived in than the reality of where I was. So,
and what was happening to you was kind of like the plot. I mean, if you were wanting to believe that, like you were now like jailed and weird people and trying to give you medicine, you know what I mean? Like,
1,000,000%, which is like terrifying, to be like, okay, I'm just being like captured and gaslit that I'm like not well,
Yeah.
Yeah.
So how long did it take for you to come out of it?
I got released. It was like 11 nights, 12 days later. But it's like, it's like a slippery slope of still kind of being triggered by things. So even though I got out of the hospital, 12 days later, I'm not like, well, it's not like I'm me again. I'm like, for example, we go back to our apartment and the elevator that was like dinging, which it always did. But that ding reminded me of every time I heard the elevator's doors open on that Saturday, I was like, oh my God, they're getting closer. My time is running out. And the first time
Can I say, did you just hear her? It was a sound, an elevator dinging sound that was a triggering to her.
But that ding reminded me of every time I heard the elevator's doors open on that Saturday, I was like, oh my God, they're getting closer. My time is running out. And the first time we like call the elevator and it dings, it's almost like a shock runs through my body, right? I'm like, because I'm entering our apartment and my husband, God bless him, he had a ton going on, but he hadn't fixed the rattling fridge. And I was like, you have to fix this fridge, because it's like connecting to this. And he's like, probably, well, I know he was like, I've been parenting our 2 children. Anyway, so all of the reminders, it was like I was entering a battle, what my body remembered as a battlefield, our apartment. And so the ding of the elevator, the rattling fridge, everything's kind of pulling me back. And every time something does that, I'm like, I'm not sure if right now, if I'm believing that the rattling fridge is releasing poisonous gas or if I'm remembering a time when I believed it. And that was honestly one of the hardest things to get better for me, was like, just not to think it was like to discern whether I was believing deluded thoughts again, or if I was remembering a time when I did. And it took me a long time to kind of work with those thoughts instead of just freak out. And, my first night home, I hadn't seen my kids in a while and had been away from them longer than I ever had in my entire life. I go to pick them up at daycare with my husband. I am great to be with them and feeling like I don't remember how to parent. I'm like, got this narrative of what a shameful mess I am. No one's mentioned the illness that has taken me down.
Okay. Do you hear this? No one's mentioned the mental illness. She's shameful. Nobody's talking to her about it. Let's just all walk around her on eggshells and pretend nothing has happened. Is that going to be the best decision for this situation? I'm sorry. Let me know what y'all think.
So they go to bed that night and, I'm like done pretending. I just kind of collapse on the floor and I tell my husband, I don't think I can do this. And he's just like, what do you mean? I'm like, I just don't know if it's happening again or whatever. And I'm like, they told me if I think it's happening again, I should call this number. And if I want to kill myself, I should call this number. And I don't know. And he's just like rubbing my back. Like, I think you're going to be okay. I was terrified if I didn't sleep, I would slide back into it because that is risk of relapse, at least to my knowledge, is closest to when you've just come out of there. And sleep is so critical for everyone's mental health, but especially for mine at that moment. And so actually that night I was home. They didn't give me any sleep meds out of the hospital, which seems bananas to me now. Not
they didn't give her sleep meds coming out of the hospital. That I find that very, very, very interesting. Very interesting. We, again, comparison wise, have heard about all the sleep medicines. Lindsay's, hi, baby. You need to come say hi. Okay, everybody. It's Lola time. She said, Mommy needs a break. Okay. Her needs a break. Okay. We got Lola time for just a minute. She said, Mommy looks stressed.
Like good care because I just gone through this experience. I was going back home. And so I ended up actually waking up in the middle of the night, or not waking up, shaking my husband in the night because I've been laying there awake. And I'm like, I'm going to go to Dwayne Reed. I'm going to walk there. I'm going to try and get something to help me fall asleep because I'm worried if I don't get any sleep, I'm going to fall back into that in the morning. And, I actually went out on my own in New York City at night, like probably 2 a.m., got sleep meds, came back, took those. And thankfully I fell asleep enough. And maybe I wasn't going to slide back into it if I hadn't got them. But I was so terrified of it just taking me over again.
Yeah, she may have shown no signs. Words are hard today. She possibly showed no signs at the hospital of sleep problems,
Oh, and you had never had, and forgive me if I'm using the wrong terminology. I'm just trying to figure it out, but you had never had like a psychotic episode before.
No, I hadn't had a psychotic episode. I'm not diagnosed bipolar.
Yeah.
I don't have any mental health history to speak of. I mean, like most people, I've had blue days and dealt with a little bit of, but nothing nothing that is like diagnostic like that. And so this was really out of the blue for me. And again, totally blindsided because I didn't know about it and my husband didn't know about it. So
you must have been scared.
Oh, that's just
you're probably trying to be strong for you in the moment. I mean, I'm just thinking how I would be like, what's about to happen,
Yeah. I mean, scared is like a deep understatement, but yes. And then my husband's terrified. He's like, is my wife ever coming back? Yeah. No one mentions postpartum psychosis as a possibility while I'm in there for 12 days. No one mentions it as a possibility when I'm in aftercare for 6 weeks. And it's only when I land in a chair of a fellow in reproductive psychiatry that I tell her what happened. She's like, oh, it sounds like you had postpartum psychosis. And that is like naming it is like, oh, okay, maybe I was sick. Like maybe I'm not just, the narrative in my head at the time with my limited understanding of mental health at that point is I felt like a shameful mess. I was kind of like unfit to mother, it was just like all those narratives of like what motherhood should be and then what it was for me. It was just like kind of punishing me. And so starting to kind of make the turn from beating myself up about it to self-compassion and realizing I was sick and then kind of prioritizing my own healing was really, really, really critical for me. And being able to name things like postpartum psychosis and also, oh, you went through trauma, you have PTSD. Like, no, you're not believing this again. You're being triggered. And so that stuff was so, so helpful for me in my recovery.
Do you feel like you fully recovered?
Yeah, I do. I actually feel like I'm a better version of myself. I'm a way more compassionate human. There's something about like, at least for me, something you never expect happening to you to happen to you. Like, okay, I'm like waking up in Bellevue Psychiatric Hospital. Like, didn't see this coming. It just like was such a good lesson in just like I don't know, shedding judgment, and instead like just kind of knowing that nothing is given. We're all kind of like acting from our own, kind of doing the best we can and offering compassion. So I think I'm healed, but I also think the experience to me at this point has been one that has grown me as a person in positive ways. And
Okay, I'm going to leave that one right there. And all these are in my description box. Y'all can finish where we left off. If somebody wanted to put a timestamp down, we are 34 minutes in on the Brian Enton story. If somebody wanted to go finish watching that on their own later, we're going to watch bits and pieces of this. This article was this stream. Oh, come on, Shayla. This was everything the cameras missed inside the Lindsay Clancy courtroom. It was by Tony Bruski. This was August 14th. This was 2 days ago. But it had more to do with a couple of the other guys. They were actually in the courtroom as the trial was going on, a couple of these, and was able to actually sit near them and see the emotion and deal with everything that not only the person who committed the crimes, but the others around them. You know, we talk so much more is that not only does it affect the person that committed the crime, whether they go to prison, get death penalty, go to a mental hospital, they're affected. But keep in mind, there's so many others that are affected. And even us as an audience peeking in as we are watching this trial as it happens has brought about emotions for some of us that we had cared to bury or had chosen to bury. It has brought up more of a discussion within the mental health field. And I'm all for that. I'm for that. So I want to be sure that that was verbally known, is that I am very well up for discussion of change of the mental health field right now, because there's so much that could be changed, in my opinion only.
As well, you know, Tufts didn't consult on this with anyone. It was just startling. So, Bob, we're seeing the effect. I'm watching. I was looking for you all week in the audience there. What I know, what we're feeling at home, which is traumatic. We're seeing her fall apart. We're seeing the redirects that people are doing onto Patrick, and I think just because of his affect was different, and also because people are believing it couldn't possibly be her. Look at her. It couldn't possibly. So they got to pin it somewhere else. That's the effect coming through the camera. What's the jury doing? What do you feel in that courtroom from the jury? How are they seeing this thing?
So in the debacle day, which was not yesterday, but the day prior,
he's speaking of on Thursday when the medical examiner was reading everything and she was losing it at the table, and the fact that she sat there instead of the judge putting her in a separate room and letting her deal with her emotions away from the jury, and the jury not being able to see her go through that, whether it was good for the prosecution or good for the defense or Commonwealth or defense, doesn't matter. The fact is she sat there, and that's what he's speaking of right now.
Day, which was not yesterday, but the day prior. I mean, the jury was obviously feeling it. There was one juror in particular, and I've seen, like, my wife is like, you have to be telling the people what the jury's doing. And I'm like, well, honey, you know as well as I do that I can't read minds, and neither can you. And I've never met a lawyer that can. What are they thinking? I have no idea. If, you know, I give body language the weight that it deserves, which is very little.
Part of a whole.
Right. You know, right. It's part of the collective. Are there things that people do that obviously are indicative of a feeling? Obviously. So I'm not dismissing that, but, you know, thinking that you've cracked a case and you've figured somebody out based on the body language, I just don't subscribe to that.
Yeah.
I'm not besmirching anybody that believes that stuff, but, you know, good on you. But there was a woman in the second row, because what I was looking at, a lot of jurors were stealing glances at Lindsay during the breakdowns. All right. So almost the entire first row, there's two younger, I'd say the two youngest jurors, female, in that first row. they would steal a 3 to 5 second glance at her as she's breaking down. There was a woman, I would say over 50, back row, who was just staring, watching Lindsay the entire time and dabbing her eyes. Now, what she's dabbing her eyes for could be a multitude of things. Obviously, it could be that she's feeling empathy for Lindsay, as I do. I put a tweet out contemporaneous to that moment going on where I said I desperately wish I could give Lindsay Clancy a hug.
Okay, so he's going to talk about he had tweeted on Twitter that he had wished he could give Lindsay Clancy a hug during that time while he was sitting in the courtroom and all that was going down. He got backlash for it. He got backlash for it on Twitter for doing that. I have no opinion on that. I did see something up here. Steve, you're throwing tomatoes. Hey, Steve, guess what? We have memberships available for $1.99. You could become a check-in quacker, and for $4.99 a month, we have extended stay quackers, and we have extended stay sleuths. And if you become a member, we have also special emojis you could use. We have a little voodoo looking duck that a lot of people in chat like to use if you're a member. So thank you for being here.
Saw the response to that too.
Yeah, you saw the response to that. I'm here for it. Because if it gets the mental health conversation going, yes. I'm here.
God damn it, Bob. You have empathy for people.
Girl, no, I turned that off. I said, no, I can't. It was too emotional. Muffins came in yesterday and spent the afternoon with me, and we played Wheel of Fortune and something else on the PlayStation and hung around and just did mommy-daughter things. So, no, Muffins and I did not watch Bob's 7-hour marathon yesterday. See, look, Muffins over there throwing her ducks, hearts, swirls. This case just breaks my heart. I don't see how putting Lindsay in jail is any value except to destroy any part of her soul that has survived. I have to agree with you on that. I personally feel she needs a mental hospital, just like Andrea Yates. Andrea has come up for review many times. She has denied each time. She says, no, I know I need to be here. She's fine. Trivial Pursuit. That's what it was. Thank you, Muffins. I knew we were playing a couple games. It's hard. It's hard. She knows what she did. She said she did it. Of course, we got the internet out here doing what the internet does, trying to play games and sleuth and do stupid things and try and say Patrick this and you know what? This woman's already admitted she did it. We all know about her postpartum depression or psychosis. We have listened to it. We are trying to understand it as a community. Is it easy? No, absolutely not. It's not easy. It's not easy at all. Here we go. And this might sum it up for the day. That might sum it up for the day. Thank you, Chai. There are no winners in these cases. Because not only is the children gone, the mother's hurting, the father's hurting, you've got grandparents hurting, you've got aunts, uncles, you've got not only them. I'm not trying to get pity or anything, but damn, it brought up some mental health shit that I had to relive with. So, it has affected more than just the immediate family. You watched it off and on. You couldn't watch it all. Yeah, I couldn't do it either. I couldn't either. Okay, Lisa Hamilton. There you go. Yeah, Bob's a hugger. Don't know Bob Mota's a hugger. As a matter of fact, anyways.
How dare you?
And there, I think the win has already occurred. I was talking to Todd and Tony before you got on, Bob. This has been such an attention draw for so many reasons, and there is no justice for these children. She's going to be behind bars, either locked to a bed or in general pop for the rest of her life. She just wants to die. And we all agree with the fact that she killed her kids. It looks as if she premeditated it. The only argument is, was she psychotic during the premeditation or not? And that's what these experts, especially on defense, are going to say and claim. And when you look at her behavior in the courtroom, when you look at the testimony of anyone, the only thing that could justify someone who had a life arc of hers for that is a psychotic break. I've never even seen one this profound. And so we're not even arguing on any of the facts. It just comes down to, will the jury believe she's psychotic or not? Was she in that state, which is completely, as we're going to find when Reddington hits it on Monday, completely within.
They do believe, which I tend to agree with them, that the state is going to rest on Monday and that we're going to go into the defense side of this trial. I believe that also. I believe that's why they took Friday off for the jury, was so they could get all their little duckies in a row and be sure that they got everything taken care of and lined up for next week. That was my opinion of why we took off Friday.
Exactly. The jury believes she's psychotic or not. Was she in that state, which is completely, as we're going to find when Reddington hits it on Monday, completely within exactly what the definition of all this is.
Well, I feel like people don't understand what psychotic means. I mean, I saw it right there in the comments. Not one person, not one has said she was psychotic. Not one. Okay, we say that 5 more times and maybe.
Gotta love Tony. He's addressing some of those crazy comments. A lot of my crazy comments I don't address. I let them roll on by. Y'all want to type some crazy shit? Y'all go right ahead. You will not be addressed.
Maybe you'll feel better about yourself. But here's how this works. In the treatment, in the times that they were visiting her prior to this, she was not in a psychotic state. She just wasn't there yet. Okay, there's the answer to your question. That's why they didn't say she was in a psychotic state at that moment in time. Like, she felt this is something, it goes in and out. It can happen for a burst and be done. They're not going to know 3 to 4 weeks in advance that she's in a psychotic state. There's a difference. And this is what Siobhan always talks about. There's a difference between someone who is a psychopath and psychosis. Two very different things. It's about as stupid as saying, well, they didn't treat that burn victim for burn injuries when they went in for the checkup 5 weeks earlier. Well, they they weren't in the house that burned down yet. But why didn't they treat them for burns? Because they weren't yet a burn victim. That's how that works.
And it was established that there was elements of mania coming in here, and as Siobhan described it, mania is a stepping stone to the psychosis. I mean, but that, again, we're going to find out on Monday. Hey, we'll see what the experts say on Monday when defense has their turn, or if he hits it on Tuesday. But
18 people is a lot of people to get onto the same page of this. I mean, Bob, I know, body language is only one thing. You've been in a lot of courtrooms, though. You've seen a lot of people try to sell a line of bullshit to a jury. And it's a line of bullshit. And some really try hard. Some are just defiant and assholes like Corey Richens. Obviously, this is.
God, I'm sorry. I didn't know he was going to say that. Holy shit. I'm sorry. God, that took me back. I'm sorry. Whoa. I must have tuned out that part when he originally. Well, he just threw shade at Corey Rich. Oh my goodness. Sorry. That just sorry, guys. I'll rewind that just a second.
To a jury, and it's a line of bullshit. And some really try hard. Some are just defiant and assholes like Corey Richens. Obviously, this is its own monster over here of what we're dealing with. When you compare it to that, when you compare it to rooms where you've seen people really try to get one over on somebody or present in a way that they really want them to believe something. I don't think Lindsay Clancy gives a shit what anybody thinks of her.
Would you agree with that? Excuse me. Oh. The last of that chicken broth is making me get the burps. I'm so sorry. You're back to listen. All right, go back. Put me back on your big TV. I'm not going to embarrass myself and say hi to Ann today. You stopped watching when he said Karen Reed was guilty. Yeah. They've got some of these people have some weird theories, but I thought this was quite interesting.
By her reactions. Is that coming?
And do you all let me know what y'all think, even in the comments below and on Replay Crew? Do you think Lindsay Clancy cares what others think about her?
Across. I mean, where do you feel the jury, or how do you feel the jury is receiving her outbursts, for lack of a better term? And I mean, I'd be outbursting too. I mean, in a situation like this, how do you think it's being received when they're shutting down court, when they're taking breaks because of it? Are they feeling empathetic? Are they feeling emotionally moved by what is going on here? And I guess it can be moved in either direction. But what's been the observation?
Yeah, you'd have to.
You know what, Cindy? I have to say that too. She doesn't want to be. She didn't want. She tried to kill herself. No, she slit her wrist, slit her slope, jumped out of a window. Do you really think she wants to be here and go through all this? I don't know. I have questions.
Be emotionally dead. Yeah, you'd have to be emotionally dead not to have feelings. And like you said, what those feelings are depend on the mindset of that person.
Yeah.
But it's impossible not to feel it in that courtroom. I mean, it's like, I always say that trials are fascinating to people because we're watching the human condition in its worst possible light, and we find it fascinating.
Yeah.
You know, and we're sitting here watching this in real time with an understanding, from my perspective, that this woman was failed by everybody that she came in contact with in the healthcare system. And she realizes, she knows what she did. Like, I mean, are people under the misconception that Lindsay Clancy did not become aware of the fact that she killed her own children, the people that she loved more than anybody in the world? And that's right. Like, I need that to resonate with people. I need people to understand that she loved those 3 children more than any other human being on the planet. And she did this to them.
Mm-hmm.
And if you don't think that she knows that, she knew it immediately. Like, she's been knowing it for years. Yeah. This is her hell, the hellscape that is her mind is worse than any prison cell that exists on the planet.
Yeah.
Where she's living at second to second, every day of her life is an absolute hell that I would not wish upon my worst enemy. And so what you're seeing with this jury is, it is impactful. How it's going to impact that particular jury is an individual by individual thing, because as you're seeing online, when I posted the desperately wish I could give her a hug, you know, all the torch and pitchfork, all the I don't give a shit, eye for an eye people. I don't care if she was psychotic. I mean, there is a portion of the population that in this circumstance, when a mother kills her own children, is unwilling to give them a pass no matter what the reason is. You did the act, we're throwing you in jail, and we're throwing away the key. And
it's not a pass.
Well,
it's not a pass. She's not getting out of jail. That's the thing that's getting me.
She's not.
What gets me is
she's not getting out of jail. She will be in a psychiatric facility. She will not be, even though it's not jail, she will be in a locked facility. If she's found
so much greater than this case. Nobody's trying to give Lindsay Clancy a pass. She can go away forever. I'm cool with that.
I'm cool with it.
But and I think
I'm cool with it too. And that's why you see some of these weird people typing some weird things, and I'm not addressing them because they're like, killer, you know. Blah, blah, blah. Well, you know what? I'm not giving her a pass. No, ma'am, no, sir. She took the lives of 3 people. She needs to pay. My opinion of her paying for that will be life in a facility, in a hospital, because you know what? She's already paid. She's lost her 3 children. She's lost her husband's moved on, started a whole new family. Let's look at, she can't walk. She's going to be in a wheelchair the rest of her life. Let's be reasonable, people. Let's be reasonable. Don't put on blinders. Don't act stupid. Don't act like you don't understand that the mental health care system is failing over and over and over. And yeah, she's locked in a wheelchair for life. We're in the prison of her own mind and actions. Thank you.
She's cool with that too. It's about understanding this and recognizing this so it can be caught, can it be seen earlier? And this is one of those cases where I don't know that you really could get much. I mean, there's certainly other ways that you could have helped Lindsay Clancy, and we probably wouldn't be in this space. But psychosis, when in a condition like this, the way it did, it kicked in. Whatever triggered it. And what happened is what happened, which can very scarily happen to almost anybody if they're in the right sort of state. And I think that scares a lot of people, and they're afraid to really go down that road and understand that. But the reason for this conversation, the reason that this is a big case and people are talking about it, is to prevent the next one.
To prevent the next one. That's all. That's all I want to do. That's all my voice is here for. Probably a hard place to end a conversation like this, because everything we've talked about tonight with Andrea Yates, Rusty Yates, Lindsay Clancy, and this other lady who has had personal experience of postpartum psychosis. We listen to these other creators, their thoughts, and we still don't have simple answers. Maybe that's the point. Tonight wasn't about telling you how or what to believe, who you're supposed to believe, excusing what happened to innocent children. They still lost their lives. It's about listening to people who are experiencing postpartum psychosis or any type of mental health. I'm sorry, I'm getting emotional. And we listened to Rusty talk about him being a father and losing his life, his woman, his wife, but yet he still calls her. He still calls her. He doesn't know what kind of Lindsay he's going to get, but he still calls her. We sit behind our computer screens, and we watch these trials. We have our feelings, we have our emotions, we have our judgments. We don't have to agree. We don't have to agree with the headlines of sensationalism of things we see. The mental health doesn't always look or present itself as people expect it to. So I guess the one point I want from y'all to take away tonight is what should happen after a tragedy like this? What can we do before a tragedy? How can we recognize things? How can we help? Listening, questionings, leave room for knowledge, growth, things we don't know about. I'm not reading chat right now. Mostly and importantly, there's families and there's children that are involved in these stories that are the center of all this, and that's who we need to think about. Behind every headline is a real person with real feelings and real emotions. You is smart, you is kind, you is important. And with that, everybody needs to take a moment and learn about awareness. I will be here tomorrow at noon for the next day of the Lindsay Clancy trial. I appreciate every one of you for hanging out in the duck pond with me today. If you haven't liked that, hit the like button, subscribe to the channel. I would ask that you do so on your way out. And until I see you next time, peace.